Hello, welcome to a pretty different video. Today we're going to be ranking every single league that's on career mode into one of these 5 rankings. Now I know I haven't done a huge amount of league guides on FIFA 23, but I thought this would maybe get me a chance to talk about some of the leagues we haven't talked about in the past, and hopefully you guys will give this a go as well. So feel free to use the link that's in the description to make your own ranking charts and send it to me either on Discord or on Twitter or however you want to try and get it to me. Anyway, let's not waste too long trying to describe what a tier list is. I'm sure you know exactly what it is. And we're going to be trying to do this in alphabetical order. So check along the bottom of the screen for every single chapter. I'll try and cut it up into the league so you can skip to the ones that you're more interested in. So let's start off with the Argentinian league. So this is actually a pretty good league. It's got a lot of young talent, some very interesting teams. However, I feel like it doesn't really have the right amount of stadiums, player faces, and I don't think it even has the right sort of team graphics and things like that. So we're going to be putting that one in average. The Australian league, I actually don't really rate this league at all. It's probably the best way to do a Pentagon challenge, but I wouldn't actually recommend you go out and do an Australian league save unless maybe you're Australian and you actually have some kind of affiliation with a club in this division. The Austrian league, I think there's better minor leagues in Europe as well. There are some interesting teams in there. You could do things like Salzburg and then move to Leipzig or move to New York Red Bulls. But I wouldn't really recommend, again, that you go out and do a save in the Austrian league. I would, however, recommend you do one in the Belgian league because it has a pretty unique structure where the league sort of splits halfway through. You play in a championship group and a relegation group. However, there isn't actually relegation, so really it could be better. But I do really think the Belgian league is a pretty good save on FIFA career mode. So our second Asian league is going to be the Chinese league, and this is absolutely awful on this year's game. There has been some previous years where this has actually been a pretty fun league. However, I really wouldn't recommend you give the Chinese league a go. There's no money in it, there's no big players, and a lot of the teams are just straight up broke or have like 50 rated players in every position. It's really not that interesting of a save. In terms of minor European leagues, I would say the Danish league is pretty similar to the Austrian league. There's some interesting teams in there. You've got Salzburg in Austria, you've got Copenhagen in Denmark, but beyond trying to make an all-Danish team and seeing how far you can go in the Champions League, there really isn't that much to do because all of the teams are very similar in rating. Now, I think the Premier League is probably the best league on FIFA. It's got a lot of real faces. It's got every team has its own stadium now, and of course you've got a lot of the broadcast packaging, things like that, a lot of special commentary lines going on for the Premier League. So I really do think that that's a good league to be going with. However, the Championship I think can be a bit boring. It's not as good as the Premier League, and you haven't got the road to glory like you have in League 2. I'd say League 1 is probably a little bit better than the Championship, so we'll put the English leagues in this weird pattern where it goes the best one, the worst one, the second worst, and then the second best. The French leagues, again, that's not too interesting. It does have the right packaging. It's not as good as the Premier League, but you have got the sort of challenge of overcoming PSG. So we'll put that one in pretty good because I do actually enjoy my saves in France quite a lot. I would prefer to play in Belgium or in League 2 because the road to glory is there and the special league structure in Belgium, but we'll put France there. And League 2, again, I think that's pretty interesting. It's probably more interesting than the Championship simply because it's the furthest down road to glory you can actually do in France. And there are a lot of interesting teams that have fallen from grace in here, like Bordeaux. So yeah, definitely have a look at Ligue 2 if you haven't ever done a save in that league before because it is an underrated league. Now, I'm going to be a little bit boring again and put the Bundesliga in amazing. It's better than the French league in my opinion. It's not quite as good as the Premier League, but a lot of the teams in here are super interesting. It's got a lot of stadiums, got a lot of faces, a lot of money, and I do think it's pretty good. However, the Bundesliga's second division is worse than the Championship. It's not got as many stadiums, it's not got any players that I like and know, so I put that in a bit boring, maybe a bit lower down than the Championship. The third league is just as good as a League 2 in my opinion. There's something about German road to glories that are actually quite fun to do. I don't see too many people actually doing them, but everyone that I know who has actually done a save in this league really enjoys their time playing in Germany. You've got some real big teams from the past that are in this division. There's a lot of history and a lot of storylines you can do, and that's what I think makes the third division of Germany such an interesting league. Similar can be said for the Eredivisie. While it is a minor European league technically, it is also like the 5th best one on FIFA. So it's a pretty good save. The Belgian league's a bit more interesting with the structure, but the teams and the players in the Eredivisie are a lot better. So you've got sort of the European adventures as well. So I really do rate the Dutch league quite high on FIFA. The Indian Super League, I have never done a save in this. I don't know anyone who ever has done a save in this. It seems like it's just a league that's in there to make up the numbers. I mean, there's never been any sort of Ultimate Team stuff to do with the Indian Super League. There's never been any career mode teams that are particularly amazing. And I don't think they're even that great in the Asian competitions and stuff like that. So I definitely wouldn't bother an Indian Super League. Sorry if you are Indian. Similarly for Ireland, it's the worst league in Europe on FIFA, and it's just not that fun. All the teams are sort of 55 rated, but while that does seem like it could be a really good road to glory, you get this grind where the league's so easy that you don't even bother playing any of the matches, and it just stops being interesting really early on. Because of the licensing issues with the Italian league, as much as I love Italian football and I always do my Football Manager saves on Serie A, there's absolutely no real reason to pick this over the French league or the German leagues or the English leagues if you want to do a big club in Europe, unless of course you really want to try and recreate maybe AC Milan or Juventus, trying to get them back to the top of European football. I did a save in the second division though, and I think that's a lot more interesting than the first division, which is a little bit weird. I think that's the first time we've actually done that on this list. So the second division has a lot of old teams, a lot of new teams, because of course it was a new league in this year's game. So I think we're going to put that in pretty good, because I do recommend you do a save in this league if you haven't done one on FIFA 23 already. The Korean League is a league that I didn't touch until I did my Pentagon Challenge. I really did enjoy my save on this game. I think the fact that it's in Asia, while this is probably a negative for the Australian, Chinese and Indian leagues, the Korean League is just about at the right level for this to be interesting. You have a tough challenge trying to beat the Saudi teams in Asia. You've got a lot of good Korean players who are playing in Europe that you can try and bring back. I had Hwang, I think plays for Nottingham Forest in real life. And it was just a really fun stop to try and win the Asian Champions League with a Korean team. Like I said, it was challenging and it was just generally fun. I do recommend you look at that league. The Norwegian League is pretty similar to the Danish League, honestly, and we're also going to do the Swedish League in here as well. All three of the Scandinavian leagues, they're all have the same sort of problem that the Austrian League has. There's one or two really good teams, there's no real stadiums in the game, a lot of the players don't have faces, and not many of the players have very good potential. So while they are fun to look at in real life and play on Football Manager and things like that where you're going to play the save for a long time, on FIFA, if you play in one of these leagues, you're going to dominate it after 1 or 2 years, and then you're going to sort of regret picking the league, or you'll move on to one of the other leagues in Europe, maybe to Germany or England or France. So I just can't really recommend that you ever give one of the Scandinavian leagues a go, which is a real shame because they are full of interesting teams like AIK and Malmo and Copenhagen, like we mentioned earlier. If you can think of a cool storyline or challenge to make the Scandinavian leagues fun, leave it in the comments below because I'm always interested in trying to move these teams up and maybe them being a little bit more interesting in the future if I can make a video on them. The Polish league, however, I think is going to be an average league. It's a similar situation to the Scandinavian leagues, but it's not quite as bad because there's a lot more Polish players with high potential and a lot more Polish players playing around Europe who you can bring back to the league. It's also got a pretty good name pool on FIFA compared to some of the other nations, so you're not going to end up with a load of Kovalenkos. I think you get them in the Ukraine. Poland does have quite a good selection of names, so I can recommend this league, but I'm going to recommend you use one of these other leagues more than the Polish league. Another league I recommend more than Poland is Portugal, alphabetically very close, but on FIFA I think it's probably an amazing league. I put this as the third best league simply because you have 3 very good European level clubs, you have a super huge amount of potential, you have a realistic way of bringing players in from South America, which are a lot of the most important and most interesting players on the game. If the Brazilian league was in here, I think that the Brazilian league would make Liga Portugal possibly be better than the Bundesliga and maybe on par with the Premier League. But seriously, you can play as anyone in this league and it'll be a fun save. You can play as Braga like I did on this channel. That was really interesting, trying to beat the big 3. You can play as one of the big 3, and then you've also got the challenge of being the best of the big 3. Or you can play as one of the other teams in the league like Santa Clara, who have an interesting location, or one of the other teams that maybe don't have the best players, but they will still have a ton of potential. So really do give Liga Portugal a go, either on your next FIFA 23 save or on your first one on FC 24. I think the Romanian league is pretty similar to the Polish league, but it also has the same problems as the sort of Scandinavian teams. So if I could, I would put it in between average and a bit boring, but we're going to leave it in average just simply because I love the sort of challenges and I like the atmosphere and all the different rivalries. If you look into a club and you pick a club in this league and look into them, I promise you're going to find something pretty interesting, which can't be said for every single club in Scandinavia, just because they're a bit more stable as countries, whereas Romania is a bit more turbulent, and I think that gives sort of the clubs a little bit more of an edge and a bit more of an interesting background on basically every club. The Saudi League is, of course, everywhere in the world at the moment. It's not an amazing league, it's not pretty good. Next year it could be average or pretty good, depending on like the difference, the level of balancing between the clubs. On this year's game though, I would put it in don't even bother, because a lot of the players haven't actually updated on FIFA 23 yet, so it's not much point playing it now. If you're going to play it next year, where it probably will be a pretty good or an average league on that game, but right now it's definitely a don't even bother. Scotland has exactly the same problems as the Scandinavian countries we've just mentioned. Romania has the same problem as well. But the Scottish teams, they're a bit more interesting to me personally, of course being English. I know a little bit more about Scotland than I do Scandinavia, so I'm going to bump this up into average. Not only because I'm trying to make this look nice and pretty balanced between all the different levels, but I think Scotland, Celtic and Rangers, next year they'll both have their stadiums in the game. They have a lot of big links to some big players in England. So maybe trying to make the Scottish League as good as the Premier League could be something interesting to do on FIFA. But yeah, it's definitely an average league. Potentially can be boring if you choose someone like Celtic and Rangers. La Liga is where I spend probably most of my time on FIFA saves, so I'm actually going to put both divisions in amazing. And this is the only country where I think I can do this for. There's so many stadiums, there's full licensing. It's actually an EA sort of sponsored league now. You can see it's La Liga EA and La Liga EA Hypermotion. This is the second division. But basically every single team on the game is super interesting in some way. Either you'll be trying to recreate something from the past, you'll be trying to redevelop a team from an interesting location, or a team with some really cool players. I really do think Spain is probably the best country on FIFA for the way that it's replicated in the actual game. There's a lot of realism going on, you've got the right graphics, you've got all of the teams are licensed, unlike Italy. And I think with the new partnership, that's probably only going to get better going into FC24. So if you haven't done a save in Spain already, try a second division club and try and get them promoted to the first division. Someone like Malaga would be really fun. I've done a couple of videos on them, so check out my channel if you haven't already watched those videos. So we've got 3 more teams left. We've got Switzerland, we've got Turkey, and we've got the MLS. So I think Turkey is actually a pretty good league. Surprisingly, it's challenging compared to some of the other leagues that are a similar size. You've also got the Champions League, which is pretty interesting. It's a unique sort of region. It's also, I think, the only majority Muslim league that's playing in the UEFA Champions League on FIFA at the minute. So you have sort of an entirely different culture. You've got some pretty big clubs buying some pretty interesting players and some very old teams. So we'll put the Turkish league in pretty good. I think the Swiss league, again, has the same problem that all of these leagues have. There's not enough challenge, really. You'll be dominating it after a couple of years. You have young boys who probably aren't as good as someone like Salzburg, so it'll be even easier than playing in Austria. I wouldn't really recommend you play in the Swiss division, but if you're interested in a certain team or a certain player, then I'm sure it can be quite fun. And finally, we have the MLS, and if you've been watching this channel for a long time, you know I'm a pretty big MLS fanboy. So we're going to put the MLS. I'm not sure if it's amazing. We'll put it in pretty good because it does have a lot of players. It's got a lot of stadiums. All the teams are licensed. It's got the right graphics and stuff like that. But it could be amazing if all the systems were actually in the game. So this could be things like the draft. We can sort of simulate that, and I've done videos on how to do that, so check them out if you're interested. And things like salary cap, that's not in the game, even though it should be super easy to add. But yeah, the MLS is a pretty good league. Don't let people put you off by saying that the United States can't play football, because it's actually really good on FIFA. But anyway, this is my tier list. I put a link to this in the description below so you can give this a go. And after a certain amount of people have done it, you'll actually be able to press on the community rank, and I'll be able to see exactly how you guys have voted and ranked it. So make sure you do that. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video where I've ranked every single career mode league on FIFA. Thank you all for watching. See you soon. Cheers and goodbye.